Chapter 120, Shift. You sure this is safe? Morty asked as I stood in the sim room of my house. Probably safe since I'm just integrating some non-physical traits. Then again, this is my second Siren trait being integrated, so maybe stand a little further back, I said with a shrug. As I said, I was going to fuse a few of the traits I had stacked up within me right now. Specifically Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade, Sword Expertise Rare Grade, Gun Mastery Rare Grade, Energy Projection Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade and Entropic Consumption, Fragment, Legendary Grade. None of these were likely to cause a gory change in me, so there shouldn't need to be any need to go to my bathroom for easier cleanup. I figured I'd let my friends watch as well, since this would be one of the biggest integrations I have performed to date, both in general and with non-physical traits. Like I said though, I didn't expect this process to be dangerous at all, so they should be fine to watch. Naturally I didn't start small either and nudged Energy Projection, Tinkering Instinct, Sword Expertise and Gun Mastery all at once. My tattoos glowed brightly as my body twitched in several places, and I couldn't help but grin as a theory of mine was proven. Sword Expertise, all my stacks of Gun Mastery, Buzzaxe Expertise and Pugilist Expertise fused together into Martial Mastery Epic Grade. This new trait did exactly what you would think from the name and let me pick up any new weapon or hand-to-hand combat style near effortlessly and with extreme proficiency. In other words, I was now the Swiss fucking army knife of combat. That wasn't the only change, however, as the range of my powers had grown a little, and now every time I looked at a piece of tech my mind raced with ideas about how to modify it. That's kinda distracting actually, I complained in annoyance. What is? Lil asked confused. Oh, I integrated the Tinkering Instinct trait I had in waiting for a while, and now every time I look at any sort of tech my mind gets filled with ideas about how I could mod it. It's actually really fucking distracting, I said with a sigh. That sounds awesome, Brick said, and I had to agree. It is awesome, but also really hard to ignore for now since it's so new. Don't mind me belly aching about it though, as I'll get used to it soon enough, I said before finally moving on to the main event. Siren, Phase Trance, and Entropic Consumption, Fragment, were next, and I knew that unlike these other traits, these two weren't going to be gentle. The first because the idea that its powers differed from person to person was true, and the second because it also contained two fragments of the universe's laws, specifically a fragment of consumption and energy. I was fairly certain that if this trait wasn't a fragment but the whole thing, it would be equivalent to a Siren trait on the mythical grade. I grit my teeth as I nudged these two traits, and my body erupted in light as my tattoos blazed and my wings popped into existence. I floated off the ground as my tattoos moved to cover my skull and left shoulder nearly completely. Naturally I stripped off the energy reservoir aspect of the Siren trait first before proceeding. The Siren trait snapped into place easily, and I felt a sort of faint resonance between it and my other two Siren powers. Entropic Consumption, Fragment, however, caused a shift in my elemental powers as Fire Resistance, Elemental Body, Fire, Shock Resistance, Energetic Sustenance, Shock, Radiation Resistance, Energetic Sustenance, Radiation, Elemental Body, Shock, Elemental Body, Corrosive, and Corrosion Resistance all fused into it. The trait changed at this and became Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade. My body burned as this trait was integrated into it. A white cocoon of energy wrapped around me as my body began to flake away under the sheer destructive power it was trying to contain, and I grit my teeth against the agony as I moved rest of the traits I had in reserve forward in hopes of stabilizing my condition. All but one, that is. Agelessness was not a trait I had found in any other creature before, and one I wasn't sure how to obtain through fusion. Having it at all told me how it worked, and I had to admit that in theory a correct fusion of vitality traits should create it, but I wasn't sure. The name of the trait said it all: it stopped the aging process. In a manner of speaking, a sort of immortality. I myself did not need it, as my own lifespan was effectively endless to begin with thanks to how my powers worked, but this trait represented a chance for another to live just as long potentially. I wasn't so stubborn as to hold on to it if I was going to die otherwise, but I hoped that the other traits I had dumped in would be enough. My hope was not misplaced either. Those traits fused into my own demi-supreme body and superior vitality, with supreme body directly replacing the trait I currently had while fusing with the other body traits I had while the vitality trait fused into my own. This was just enough to counter the destructive force within me and allow my body to reach a level of balance. I grew larger and my muscle groups rearranged themselves into a superhuman configuration while their density followed suit. My skin became smooth but hard like marble. The cocoon of energy surrounding me cracked and burst apart as I freed myself from it and hovered in midair. Close to 70% of my body was covered in swirling green tattoos, and behind me my wings were almost solid after my transformation, like glass structures throbbing with barely contained power. "You good man," a voice called out, and I turned to look at the source. Morty and the others were at the edge of the room, all taking cover behind Roland's turret shield. Morty, who had spoken, flinched slightly when I looked at him. That snapped me out of the strange state of mind that came over me from the massive shift in my existence, and I reined in my powers. The glow coming from my tattoos muted and faded away as I slowly descended to land on the ground barefoot. That rush of pure destruction that had come from me had destroyed my clothes entirely, so I was completely naked at the moment. Thankfully I had the foresight to leave a spare bodysuit nearby along with my weapons, Echo and Shield. I wordlessly moved over to that area and slipped on the bodysuit while taking a pair of pants out of my inventory and slipping those on as well. Much better, not ashamed, or anything, but nudism just isn't for me, you know. I said with a chuckle. Thank God. We thought you might have lost it with that look of yours. What even happened anyways? Lil asked with visible relief. Sorry about that. The integration of the Siren trait was smooth and ended easily, we'll get back to that though. The problem came with the other trait, it fused with all my elemental traits. The final result was what I assumed would happen once I gained every element at a sufficiently high grade. I gained an aspect of the universe. Specifically destruction, and even now it's incomplete. Not that I intend to complete it anytime soon, since even this incomplete version almost fucking killed me. I said seriously. Seriously? I thought getting new traits couldn't harm you. Roland asked seriously. That is still true. It wasn't the trait that almost did me in, but rather the concept the trait controlled. Siren powers also control an aspect of the universe, but are designed specifically so that unless the one using them goes too far, the aspects won't harm them. This new trait doesn't have that safety measure. The moment I got the trait, my body was fully exposed to the power of destruction and was not strong enough to handle it. Thank fuck I had plenty of body and vitality traits left over that I had been saving to stabilize myself. I said with a shudder at the idea of if I didn't. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u=815788554 number sign : text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,179,181. Integrated traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 121, LOL. I meant it too, as even now my body strained to withstand the concept of destruction. I was fairly certain that in order to ease this strain I needed to strengthen my body while also increasing my resistance to the elements that made it up. It wasn't all bad news though, as all of my elemental powers could still be used as normal, and even a tiny amount of pure destruction could be as well, since it was a fusion of all of them. Don't let that small amount fool you, it was not something you wanted to be on the receiving end of. Destruction was one of the highest concepts in the universe and even encompassed entropy, which could be considered the destruction of all movement. Thanks to the fragments of consumption and energy that the trait I got from the destroyer had, my new trait even let me break down matter into pure energy that I could absorb and convert to life force. I hadn't tested it yet obviously, but that was something added to my list of things to do. Right along with my body's new limits, in fact. After we dispersed again, that was what I set out to do too. Like the last time my body had grown in such a manner, I tested my grip strength, bench press, deadlift, sprint speed, and squat press strength. My grip strength was easily over 2 tons, my bench press reached almost 3 tons, sprint speed over 10 meters per second, deadlift of 4 tons and squat of 10 tons. This wasn't just edging into superhuman territory but firmly in it. As for matter to energy conversion, I found that the matter used played a part as to how much energy I received. See, low density matter like dirt gave me very little energy, but the denser the material was the more I got, and the more energetic the material was the more I got as well. Uranium gave me almost as much as iridium, in fact. Not that I was all that surprised by this really, as both were high energy materials to begin with. The only reason iridium was better in my opinion was that it was cleaner and already primed for sirens in its natural state. Unlike uranium, iridium was inert in its unrefined form and didn't poison its surroundings. Still, simply being able to convert matter to energy changed the way I gathered life force forever. I even theorized that eventually I could even consume planets or even stars for life force, extending my lifespan even further past the eventual heat death of the universe. Then again, is it the heat death if I still have the energy to move around and live? Questions for later. Next up on my long-ass list of shit to do was break down all the seraph bits and bodies I had stacked up. I already had the claptraps taking the tiny pieces of metal out of the pile and feeding them to my maker to get the metal into a usable state. But the larger chunks and nearly complete bodies required my personal touch to make sure I don't miss out on any still usable tech. The anti-gravity tech, for example, was definitely something I wanted, as I could use it to create an upgrade to the armor I gave Roland. Right now the armor allowed him to survive in nearly any normal environment, but with the addition of the anti-gravity tech from the Seraphs he could also take to the sky if need be. In hindsight, I should probably also give Morty something for that too. I thought briefly before carefully pulling a still twitching bot apart. Most of the Seraphs were junk since critical components had been damaged or straight up destroyed. Even the vast majority of the thing's cores were unusable now, as they had taken bullets to them. Those cores may not be exactly delicate, but even the tiniest breach in them when drawing out the energy within could mean getting several thousand joules to the face. Best not to risk it really, and just scrap them if they were damaged at all. Even with most of the Seraphs being scrap, I still got more than enough intact tech from the hundreds of bots to last me quite a while indeed, assuming I didn't try to make something ridiculous, that is. Annoyingly, I had to start moving my house around to keep Tanis from sneakily trying to move in over the next few days, as she had been caught no less than 5 times making an attempt. The fact she seemed to think I couldn't just kick her out if she somehow managed to get her stuff in here was insane, but after years on the planet I doubted her mind wasn't at least a little changed from the experience. At least she seemed to get the message that offering sex wouldn't work, so that was progress at least. I had also managed to get up another 2 refining furnaces outside New Haven, causing the rate of the surrounding being cleared of trash to double. This even caused some of the locals to complain for some fucking reason that I was disturbing the environment, like I wasn't actually fixing corporations' fuck up to begin with. I will however freely admit that the wildlife that had gotten used to the trash being there to ambush people from weren't taking its loss well at all. Quite violently really. I even had to start making combat bots to guard the worker bots collecting the trash as the wildlife had started to attack them on sight. The workers weren't defenseless, but it was starting to cut into production since they weren't designed with combat in mind. The new combat bots were fairly basic, to be honest, as I simply created a mechanical octopus bot body that had energy blades on the end of each of its tentacles and a full-on plasma cannon on top of its head with full 360-degree aiming capability. The tentacles allowed the bots to move freely in the terrain, and fast at that. The cannons were mostly for the larger bits of wildlife that were too durable for the blades to work on. A few bandits had the misfortune of finding out why they shouldn't think my bots were the same helpless sort as the claptraps they mess with regularly in the process. They shot my bots thinking they could get a laugh out of it, only to be violently blasted apart by a ball of plasma as hot as the surface of a star and as big around as a basketball. Pierce wisely chose to warn the locals from fucking with my shit after that display. After the opening of the vault, hostilities between us had dropped dramatically since she was clearly in the wrong about us, but we still got along like oil and water. We could exist in the same place, but don't expect us to mix. It ended up taking me nearly a week to sort through all those serifs and finally have some free time. Well, to be fair, I could have had free time whenever the fuck I wanted, but I didn't like procrastinating if I could help it. "You're leaving?" Lil exclaimed in shock after I brought it up to my friends. "Temporarily leaving, yes. I need to talk with old man Jacobs about my next steps in taking over Atlas when it falls, as well as visit my main squeeze on Athena's. It'll honestly be mostly boring, so I figured I'd let you guys know before I left, since I doubted you'd want to come along," I said honestly. "So long as there's booze and stuff to shoot, I'm good with whatever," Morty said with a shrug. "Same, but with punching," Brick chimed in. "I won't say no to a vacation," Roland said, causing all of us look at him oddly. "What? I don't base my whole lifestyle around killing, you know," he said defensively. "That's fair, I suppose, and while Eden 6 would have stuff you could shoot or punch, Athena's doesn't really. It's a peaceful place, beautiful, but definitely not one for violence," I said seriously. "Just leave me and Brick on Eden 6 then, before coming back to grab us when you are on the way back to Pandora. You are in good with the Jacobs, right? Just ask them to put us up for a while," Morty suggested, and I was hesitant to agree. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u=815788544 number sign : text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,181,320. Integrated Traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 122, Victorious Return. See, if it were Roland and Lil who were going to be left behind, I might not hesitate at all, as they were both well behaved most the time. Brick and Morty, though, were not exactly well-mannered individuals, a massive understatement I know, and would probably cause some issues. The old man in particular would absolutely butt heads with them over their lack of decorum. I might get away with a bit of casual crudeness, but so long as I wasn't too out of line, the old man would let it go easy enough. But Brick and Morty, though? Manners were not their strong suit. Morty was a raging alcoholic, to put it lightly, and that meant when he wasn't sober he could be downright nasty. Brick was a whole other problem, as I very much doubted that the old man would fail to notice how similar to Mr. Torg he was. Worse in many ways, really. For starters, Brick was unapologetically savage. He got bored easily, and when he was bored he went looking for things to hurt. Not to mention his table manners were like those of a caveman. I had been working on that, though. I will ask, but let be clear here, make me regret this and I'll never bring you both along again, I said firmly. Message received, best behaviors got it, Morty said with a nod. Road trip, Brick said excitedly. I let Scooter and Zed know we were going to be gone for a while and thus out of touch before I used the teleporter room to bring my house and all of us with it to Eden 6. That's it? I thought it'd be a lot more dramatic than that from how you made it sound, Lil said with a shared look of disappointment on the rest's faces after the teleportation. I never said it was anything flashy, just how it worked. Not my fault you assumed wrong, I said with a chuckle. I led the way out my house and even had Lawton come with, since technically this was his first time on the planet as well. Leaving the portal to my house, I breathed in with a smile at the familiar scent of lemon pine sol, wood, and humidity. The room looked the same as it did before I left, with the bed nice and tidy without an ounce of dust on any of the surfaces. Smells funny here, like lemons, Brick said with a funny face. That would be the pine sol, a cleaning chemical solution for wooden surfaces, I explained. So this is your room, huh? A lot more basic than I thought it'd be, Lil commented while looking around as I put my house away. Lawton meanwhile wasted no time at all, climbing onto the bed and pulling all the covers into a single pile in the middle that he settled into while my eyebrow twitched. I had other priorities than decorating while I was here. Some things never change, I suppose, I commented while trying to ignore the nesting reptile. I pushed open the ornate wooden door to my room only to find myself face to face with a double-barrel shotgun. I didn't even hesitate to reach up with a finger and pull the barrel down to my chest with ease, despite the owner struggling and even pulling the trigger. Not exactly the welcome I was expecting, but good to see you too, old man, I said with a chuckle as I shrugged off the slug with my shield. Montgomery Jacobs glared at me for a moment before grunting and lowering his shotgun willingly. Damnation, boy, didn't anyone ever teach you to use the damn front door? He asked gruffly. Well, yeah, but my house is set to teleport me to my room, so nothing for it, I'm afraid. Anywho, introductions are in order: Brick, Roland, Lilith, Mordecai, Bloodwing, and Lawton, I said, pointing at each of the named in order. Montgomery Jacobs, the old man introduced briskly. Now that that's out of the way, shall we get comfortable as we talk business? The rest of you are free to go get acquainted with the planet in the meanwhile, I said casually. The old man let them pass as we headed for the office to talk shop. Lawton prowled behind me, sniffing everything curiously as we did so. The old man took his seat behind the desk while I took the couch nearby. Clay told me of the beast. How'd you get the wildness out of it for it to be so well behaved? He asked, looking at Lawton with intense scrutiny while the reptile was returning the stare. Training and dominance mostly. I trained him not to attack without cause or permission, and enforce that training by simply being more powerful than him. The imprinting trait I gave him before he was born was a good start, but to get here I had to teach him and make sure he knew who was in charge. Make no mistake though, he is more than capable of ripping a man apart like wet paper if he wanted to. I said casually. The old man nodded. A fine beast he is, regal even. Unlike the savage beasts he came from originally. Now I do believe it's time we talk about this insane plan of yours to swallow Atlas whole. I'd be lyin' if I said I hadn't thought Clay was jokin' when he told me. After lookin' into it though, I have to admit the idea has merit. It'll cost quite the pretty penny though, so I don't see why I should stick the tree's neck out to try and claim it for you, he said seriously. Ignoring the fact it would mean Jacobs would have a sister corporation watching its back, I have a claim to a rather lucrative mining site on Pandora to trade for it. I said calmly. A mine? You think a damn mine is worth that much money? He asked with a scoff. If it were a mundane material, no, but this is an iridium mine. Soon enough Hyperion is going to be making hand over fist amounts of money mining the stuff, and I managed to grab the rights to a particularly heavy deposit before they do. I say with a grin. All right, I'll admit you've got my attention at least. Now how will you seal the deal? He asked with a sharp look as he leaned over his desk. 60% of the mine's profit to Jacobs, 40% to Atlas after I take it over. In addition, I'll sweeten the pot by throwing in an iridium fabricator like my own for your personal use. I said with a confident smile. Oh? You really mean to go all in on this company idea of yours, it seems, he said with a look of surprise. Of course. I might be powerful and only going to grow more so, but I am only one person. I need the sort of backing and power that a full-on corporation would give me if I want to meet my full potential. Jacobs has been good to me, but I'm not one to exploit that if I can help it. Dealing with the aftermath of taking over Atlas and rebranding it is going to be a migraine and a half, but the payout will be sublime. I said honestly. All right boy, you've got a deal. I want to see what sort of corporation you make with your own two hands, he said seriously. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =815788554 number sign : text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,181,320. Integrated Traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 123, Catching Up. We couldn't exactly put it to writing quite yet since Angel hadn't come through with the scans of the planet to let me choose a spot for my mine, but the old man was more than happy to settle for shaking on it for now. With that done, the old man wanted a full rundown of everything I had been up to on Pandora since I had left. I got comfortable as I spun my tale, leaving out no details. I had to have talked for several hours at least by the time Baldrin showed up to inform us of dinner being ready. Naturally, Wainwright and Hammerlock were there for dinner, and I promised the latter a full recount of my tale so far before we ate in silence. The old man was quite prickly when it came to eating and talking and simply wouldn't let you get away with it at his table. Something Brick and Morty quickly figured out when they tried to strike up a conversation with Wainwright and Hammerlock. The tongue lashing the old man gave them was good enough to even get them on their best behavior, much to my own amusement. Not that I couldn't understand, as the old man had this sort of force of personality that made it hard not to do what he wanted. It wasn't just power or prestige, but something else that he had that I assumed came from generations of business and manners being distilled into him from birth. It was something I had noticed about this reality over time, but the more one stood out, the more presence they had. Like the average bandit psycho came and went with no impact at all on one's mind, but someone like my friends or even Scooter, they left an impression even on a single meeting. The old man had that exact same effect, though to a slightly different way. His was not a presence of violence and power like my friends or my own, but one of authority. Anyways, after dinner the old man asked Roland about his armor out of curiosity, only to get a funny look when he was told I made it with the intention of giving it to my military once I took over Atlas. He bluntly stated that he felt pity for whatever poor son of a bitch chose to get on my shit list at that point. Surprisingly though, it was Brick's punchline weapon that interested him the most, though, as he seemed downright in love with the idea of melee-centric firearms. As it turned out, Jacobs had been trying to figure out how to do something similar for some time now, but every attempt they made ended with the testers losing digits or whole limbs. I had to explain that the only reason Brick's weapon didn't suffer a similar fate was because it was made specifically for him and would only work for him specifically. It couldn't be mass-produced like most firearms. The old man seemed disappointed by this, but not surprised, as it fit what he knew. Morty's weapon though made the old man sweat once he was filled in on the details. Not that I could blame him, as the thing was an assassin's best fucking friend if they could get the right conditions. 200-mile-long shield-shattering shots were entirely impossible to predict or dodge after all. You couldn't even rely on the sound of the gun going off, as due to being an energy weapon the gun was very quiet. At most you might hear the whistle of the projectile before it gave you a new hole to breathe out of in your forehead. There was no scope glare to see either, as the scope used iridian tech to draw in light rather than reflect it. Like Clay had said, the old man cursed the bad luck that the weapon was too maluin for Jacobs despite its power. Naturally the old man asked if there was any iridian fuckery rattling about my brain that might work for Jacobs, but I had to be honest and tell him not really. The Iridians were incredibly big on energy-based technologies, so out of all the corporations they most closely aligned with Maluan for weaponry. Not to say they didn't have ballistic options too, but for every one of those they had, I found nearly 12 energy-based versions that would be both cheaper and more effective. I suppose I couldn't blame the Iridians for their tech's emphasis on energy-based things, as their sheer mastery of the universe was at such a ridiculous they had managed to effectively engineer gods. I was of course referring to us Sirens. Maybe it sounded a bit arrogant since we could still be killed and most still aged like a normal person, but we had pieces of the very universe's laws at our commands. That was the closest to being a god I have seen so far, other than the being that sent my ass into this new life that is. Still, I was grateful to the old man and threw him a bone. It was a slightly altered recipe for gunpowder that would be nearly impossible to replicate if you didn't know the trick to it. Twice as powerful at the same amount. This would allow the Jacobs guns to keep their competitive edge and even exceed most of the other corporations for a good long while, unless the other corporations got lucky and figured out the trick. The best part in my opinion was that I didn't have to bother making the recipe myself to convert my gun's ammo to that anymore. That was the trick. Corporations had to make sure the ammo that was bought always worked for their guns, a conversion mechanism. Once the Jacobs Corporation had the data added to their newer guns, all I needed was to take it and use it to override the ammo data on my own guns. Speaking of, I showed the old man the Chimera and told him my plan for it, and he agreed that it would be a good match for my current gun and shield combo. There was surprisingly a gift for me from the old man waiting out in the jungle. Ratch, a vast amount of the delicious critters in fact. Apparently ever since I had left he had been sending crews out across the planet to find and capture any they could find while burning the nests. These captured ratch were then stored in one place under constant watch and reinforcement until I could come and claim them. I had been on Pandora for close to half a year by this point, so the amount of ratch that had been gathered numbered well into the millions. I wanted to kill and harvest all of that delicious life force so I could grab Lil's powers and strengthen my body to integrate them, but knew I didn't quite have time for that at the moment. Killing that many ratch would take me at least a month, and I still had to go to Athena's and keep an eye on Pandora to make sure it didn't implode for no damned reason. As far as strengthening my body went, though, I already had a plan for that, not a complicated one but a plan nonetheless. To put it simply, I was going to binge consume as many body traits as I could regardless of quality until quantity made up its own form of quality. If the pattern held, then 5 of any grade traits made up one trait of a single higher grade, and in theory that meant I only needed about 100 common grade traits to double my supreme grade body trait. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =815788554 number $:tilde text $patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,181,320. Integrated Traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 124, Turing. That might sound like a lot, but one had to remember that most creatures had a body trait of some kind, so really I only needed to kill and devour the traits from 100 or so creatures. That still sounds violent as fuck, doesn't it? Well, can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, as they say. You never did say how long you plan to stay this time, boy, the old man said after dinner. A few days at most. I still have to stop by Athena's before returning to Pandora to make sure the planet doesn't explode for no reason. That reminds me, but could you put up Morty and Brick for a bit while I'm off on Athena's? They don't do great with sitting in one spot peacefully, and Eden 6 has a variety of things to kill to pass the time. I said honestly. I think I can put up with them for a bit, but I want some more of that gut rot I know you have stashed, he said with a piercing look. I just chuckled at that and took out a bottle of my tequila that I phase locked over to him. "Ah, now this I've missed," he said with a pleased look as he took a sip straight of the bottle. As promised, the old man put us up for our stay with individual rooms, since there were plenty in this mansion. Naturally, I just went to my own room while Baldrin showed the others to theirs. The butler didn't even bat an eye at Lawton even after he got sniffed by the inquisitive reptile. Baldrin was no stranger to the egg the pseudo-dragon came from, and thus had long prepared himself for dealing with a large reptile of some sort, even if he wasn't sure exactly what said reptile would be like. If anything, the butler seemed almost surprised by how well behaved Lawton was. Knowing where his egg came from, the man had likely expected a barely contained package of claws and teeth, only to get what was effectively a very curious dog. What was not so apparent to everyone other than me was the reptile's constant pinging of our connection about what all these new things were and what they tasted like. Outwardly the reptile seemed docile, but I knew that the only thing stopping him from eating everyone here other than my friends was my constant restraint. I wouldn't suggest that, mate. He might seem docile, but if you go poking and prodding him, not even I will be able to save you from him separating your body into multiple pieces. I warned Hammerlock, who was about to try and intensively study Loudon. The man looked startled by this mid-outstretched arm, only to freeze with sweat beading up on his brow as he locked eyes with Loudon and saw a very intelligent gaze practically begging him to give it a reason to eat him. Yes, well, as they say, caution is the better part of valor, he said to save face as he retreated hurriedly. Loudon huffed in annoyance at that and gave me this accusing look like I never let him have any fun. I just rolled my eyes at the dramatic murder lizard before we went to bed. As it turned out, the damned thing was an absolute bed hog if you tried to share a sleeping area with him. Stole all the covers and sprawled out like a fucking cat, but was the size of brick. I ended up saying fuck it and opened up my house to sleep in my bed there. In the morning we ate breakfast before I took my friends out on a tour of the local area. Naturally I took Loudon with me, as it would be good to let the big fella stretch his legs and hopefully get out some of those murderous impulses. Watch out for those jabbers now, they might seem silly at first but they are natural thieves and will rob you blind if you let them. I warned as I pointed out an orange jabber hanging lazily off the side of a tree near the small town by the mansion. Shouldn't we kill it? Lil asked, confused when she saw I had no intention of attacking it. Nah, unlike Pandora where everything and everyone wants you dead, most the creatures here are pretty passive unless you cross some sort of line or they are some sort of saurian. You see anything that looks like a lizard you shoot first, because saurians absolutely will try to kill you at every given opportunity. I said with a shrug. What about bandits? Roland asked seriously. I mean, they exist here but not nearly in any real large capacity. This is a Jacob's planet and the old tree provides for those under its leaves. Most folk here got no reason to become bandits, and the few that do tend to be either outcasts or insane to begin with. I explained honestly. A corporation that actually helps people? That feels weird. Morty said with a funny look. Don't get me wrong, now Jacob's got its own bad parts, but on the whole it's easily the most reliable of the lot in terms of supporting its people properly. I said seriously. What kind of bad parts? Lil asked curiously. Superstition runs rampant in its people, and like all corporations the company dips its toes into some messy or dark businesses sometimes. Supposedly there's an outpost on Pandora that went dark a while back after some experiment with a virus got out, even though you didn't hear it from me. I said low so it couldn't be overheard. A whole outpost went dark? And they haven't done anything about it yet? Lil asked in horror. I shook my head. Nothing to do about it at the moment. Biological disasters are really just too damned hard to deal with. I said helplessly. Damned man, I knew Jacobs had some dirty secrets but nothing like that. Morty said with a seriously frown. Considering the sheer scale that the corporation operates on, you should be thankful there's only a few such incidents. Look at Atlas that mistreats all its people in various ways, including experimentation and indentured servitude, which is to say slavery with extra steps and flowery language. Or maybe Maluan, who have so many issues with their R&D department that if it was put on a list on a single scroll the damned thing would wrap around Pandora several times. I said seriously, and they all nodded. We could all agree that while Jacobs wasn't squeaky clean, they weren't nearly as bad as they could be. And while none of us would deny how shitty such things were, we also knew well enough to leave it the fuck alone. We weren't so sort of purity group that sought to uphold truth, virtue, justice, and all that grog shit. We were more or less mercenaries who killed for profit and power, and who had to die didn't really matter to us so long as it wasn't someone we gave a fuck about. As I showed the others about, we soon came across a group of saurians and chose to watch how Loudon chose to deal with them, since he was more or less of a similar species originally. The small ones are kinda cute. Lil said with a slight coo. Polygrog, if hatched from an egg they are quite popular as pets since they don't get very big and are about as smart as the average dog. I said, not surprised. The eggs sell good in the black market 'cause of that. Morty said casually. Think you can get me an egg, maybe pull some of your Siren goodness on it to make it a bit less ugly. Lil asked hopefully. I nodded. Should be some nearby, judging from the way that one's belly has stretch marks still. Probably laid a few eggs in the last day or so, and the mothers of the species don't go far from the nests. I said, pointing at a particular polygrog that looked almost the same as the others, but as I said had faint stretch marks on its belly. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =815788854 number $:text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,181,320. Integrated Traits, Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 125, Fairy Drake. Loudon didn't leave us much choice but to search for the nest ourselves as he tore the saurians apart in a grand and bloody fashion. I took the 5 bundles of life force from the corpses and passed it all to him since he was the one who hunted them. The polygrog's nest was, as I said, nearby under the roots of a tree that had been dug out slightly. There were 3 of them that looked like swamp green, large, roughly stone marbles in total. Was only expecting a single egg, so this complicates things a bit. What do we do with the others? I asked the others. One of them is mine, so really we only need to deal with the last 2, right? Lil asked and I nodded. Yeah, but that's the issue. I said helplessly. I want one that looks like that. Brick said, pointing at Loudon excitedly. I paused at that as there was an interesting idea. Maybe I couldn't get away with making a bunch of dragons like Loudon, but what about much smaller and more docile creatures that looked like dragons? Not for myself, mind you, as I very much doubted Loudon wouldn't attempt to eat the things the moment I turned my back, but as a special ordered pet for rich folk. I even thought of a unique name for the species to sell them under fairy drakes. All I'd need to satisfy a demand for the things would be enough life force to remake the multi-limbed, winged quadruped, legendary grade trait Loudon had and grab the beautiful form trait to stuff into some eggs and boom, mini dragon, fire not included. Polygrogs were already pretty popular as pets, so it wouldn't be hard to see my idea being very profitable indeed. Alright, you've convinced me, I said eagerly as I snatched up the eggs from the nest. I know that look. You came up with sort of crazy idea, haven't you? Roland asked with a concerned expression. It's not crazy, and technically he gave me the idea, I said defensively while pointing at Brick. Kinda afraid to ask, but what's the idea? Lil asked curiously. So I can't really get away with making a bunch of repeats of Loudon, but there's actually no reason I can't make smaller and less expensive mini dragons to sell to rich folk for profit. In fact, I honestly only need 2 traits to pull it off, I explained with a grin. Not all that crazy an idea. Polygrog are already real popular pets, but a version of them that looks like a dragon? Some people will pay a mint for something like that. Morty said with an intrigued look. Is it too late to ask for mine to be like that, cuz that sounds awesome? Lil asked and I just chuckled. Nat, I'll be copying a trait from you for one of these eggs anyways, so it's no problem. Gotta move fast though, as polygrog eggs have a short 2-week-long incubation period. I said seriously. Which trait? She asked curiously. Beautiful form. Not sure why, but all sirens minus myself have it, and it serves to beautify the holder to a great deal. It's why Lawton doesn't look as ugly as these other saurians, as that was one of the traits I used on him while he was still an egg. I explained casually. Why don't you have it? Roland asked curiously. Not 100% sure, but I assume it's because of the way my powers work compared to the other siren powers. My powers nearly constantly transform my body, so the trait would likely be overwhelmed sooner or later, and so hadn't been made a part of the powers as a result. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the ones who made these powers originally added that feature to the female power sets just to try and improve the compatibility between them and my male power set. I said with a shrug. Like a harem? Lil asked with a disgusted look. Is it so hard to understand why? My powers would naturally set me as one of the most powerful sirens alive at any given iteration with enough time. The creators of the power sets likely wanted to create a method to tie the holder down to their will somehow, and what better method than emotional shackles? I with a chuckle. You seem awfully chill about the idea of being manipulated like that. Morty pointed out with a confused expression while the others nodded. That's because they failed. People aren't so simple. The trick would certainly raise the probability of the owner of my power set shacking up with one of the female power set owners, but it takes more than mere beauty for true attachments to form. No offense, Lil, but we'd never work out. Same goes for Steel and me. Our personalities clash in too many spots that given time any hookup between us would crumble. I said with a smirk. Lil just laughed and shrugged. I couldn't agree more. Friends is just right, she said with a grin of her own. Well, now that that's settled, let's go find some bugs, specifically the sort with wings. I said cheerfully. It didn't take long to find some either, though we had to go through at least 3 different species before I found one with the multi-limbed common grade trait I needed. From there I moved my target to birds and flying creatures like the dragonflies that flew about above the muck hunting other insects. From these I took the aerial expertise common grade trait that, when fused with the first trait, gave me the multi-limbed, winged quadruped, legendary grade trait I was after. Thank fucking gods my powers remembered the fusion between the 2 traits, as unlike last time I did it, so the price of the fusion was cheap at only 10,000 units of life force and didn't knock my ass out for 3 fucking days. After that I grabbed Lil's beautiful form trait and casually shunted both these traits along with 3,000 life force into one of the polygrog eggs. Fairy Drake egg. Life force, 3,572. Traits: Aphrodisiacal sweat rare grade 15,000 units, projectile gland common grade 1,500 units, pore sight trash grade 150 units, keen nose common grade 1,500 units, multi-limbed, winged quadruped, legendary grade 250,000 units, beautiful form rare grade 15,000 units. Oh, so the species name changed to match what I decided to call it. Interesting. I thought after checking on the egg after the new additions. I was sorely tempted to fix the trash grade trait that was there, but stopped myself, since the whole point of the species was to be cheap to produce and expensive to buy for maximum profit. So far this thing had only costed me about 30,000 units of life force to produce, give or take a few thousand, which wasn't too bad, as I could get that back by murdering about 30 bandits or some ratch. That first one was the only one I could do fully at the moment though, as besides the trait to give them wings, the beautifying trait that I needed was not super easy to find. The best source of it was the pond of showfish on Athena's, as far as I knew, as most species weren't evolved for appearance but survival. I told my friends this and they insisted we go to Athena's as soon as possible to complete the other 2 eggs. I waved them off however, as I wasn't in nearly that much of a rush and still wanted to spend another day at least here on Eden 6 hunting some jabbers for their body traits. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =815788854 number $:text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force, 1,132,011. Integrated Traits, Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 126, Powers and Slaughter. I left my friends to their own devices after that, as I had some hunting to do. I felt like trying my new Siren powers while I was at it. I sort of forgot to mention what exactly Phase Trance did after I got it, but I'll fix that now. As I had long theorized from the records of it I found on Athena's, Phase Trance changed based on who held it due to the concepts of soul, mind, and energy it held sway over. In my case, the power set allowed me to sort of store a kind of psychic engram of the things I devour with my original powers to use as temporary minions. It would not be much of an exaggeration to say I collected souls to obey my will after death. The only hitch was that I could only have 7 at a time, and once I used one it was gone forever. Additionally, there were 2 ways I could summon the things that I had figured out so far. The first was by paying a lump sum of life force to manifest the chosen soul until it either ran out of energy or was destroyed. The second was to slowly trickle life force to the summoned soul, effectively making it permanent unless it was destroyed. I hadn't gotten much practice with the power yet, honestly, as most things failed to impress me enough to warrant me adding them to my collection. One thing I did test, however, was how much of the mind remained of these souls after being added to my collection using a bandit on Pandora. The answer was most of it, apparently. The test subject bandit was less than thrilled about the idea of being a soul puppet and offed himself the first chance he got. Interesting stuff, let me tell you. My second test went better after I enforced a command not to kill themselves. I legitimately don't think I've ever seen a bandit so cooperative once I told him I'd let him perma-die if he helped me test the full extent of my new power. Thanks to those tests I learned that I can use my other powers through the constructs, which actually extends my range massively, as the constructs are unbound by distance unless I was using the trickle method. In theory, I should be able to use my other powers through a construct even if I was on the opposite side of the universe from it. I had a theory it had something to do with the concepts of soul and mind, but couldn't definitively prove that yet. Regardless, that made me much more dangerous now, as I didn't even personally need to be present to kill someone now, I just needed to send a construct with my regards. There was a bit of debate about the morals of this power among my friends, but we couldn't agree whether this was too far or just far enough. None of us were saints, but all of us agreed that enslaving souls was not exactly morally upright territory. Still, the way I saw it, so long as I didn't use the power on innocent people, the moral dilemma could be overlooked for the most part. After I separated from my friends and went on a rampage in the local jabber groups, I ended up with 3 new souls to use that came from mutated jabbers. The first was a jabber that was an omega, standing at well over 8 feet tall and covered in dense muscles. It wore a wooden mask with slits in it to see out of and used a large hammer made of a large rock roughly bound to a thick piece of wood. The second was a jabber that had an elemental body, shock specifically. The third, however, was unique as it had 2 tails that it used to great effect. Out of nearly 70 jabbers, finding these 3 was quite nice, and I had gathered enough body traits to gain a stack of supreme body. There wasn't much of a shift in my body when I got it, but I felt like I had stepped away from the edge of death at least, which was a massive relief. When I had told my friends that I was barely resisting the effect of the universe's destruction concept, I was not joking. I was almost afraid to even touch those powers until now, as it felt as though I was standing on the edge of a cliff with only a single foot and piss-poor balance. All it would have taken was one wrong puff of air to send me over that edge. Now I wasn't out of danger entirely, but at least I had both feet down now, and it'd take a bit more than a stiff breeze to ruin me. Not a lot of breathing room, but I'll take what I can get at this point. It took me all day to hunt this amount down, and I even lost out in terms of life force, as after taking the life force from the corpses I still was in the hole 75,200 units. Nothing for it, unfortunately, as until I was good and stabilized I couldn't go back to being frugal with my life force. I provided dinner this time using my food maker, as even the old man had asked me for the stuff. Not that I could blame any of them for it, as the sheer quality of the food made by my maker thingy had no room for human error and was thus as close to perfection the foods in question could get. I had to admit that out of all of the things the Iridians made, this had to be one of the biggest flexes. Really just the pinnacle of house appliances right here, let me tell you, couldn't live without it. Anyways, after dinner we turned in for the night and got up in the morning. After spending so long on Pandora, it felt weird as shit to have a day cycle that wasn't frankly insane. Still, I didn't waste any daylight and set out with Loudon to hunt for jabbers. Had to take the fast travel station to the deeper parts of the planet though, since I had scared off most of the fuckers from the area by the mansion with my massacre the day prior. I left the Saurians to Loudon, who relished the bloody thrill of it all. With my senses, finding the nearest jabber group took me at most 5 minutes, and that was just because of travel time. It was a decent-sized one with roughly 15 members, led by a flaming-bodied one. They died without much resistance, and I added the leader to my soul collection. The sting of losing life force for the body traits sucked, but I ignored it. I took the life force from Loudon's kills during this time and sent it back to him, as was our usual, with a bit less, as there was a grog with a minor regeneration trait that I took for myself. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =8157885 number $:text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 1,051,302. Integrated Traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade X2, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. Chapter 127, A Day in the Life. That first group was definitely not the last, however, as we hunted down close to another 90 jabbers before the day was at its end, and the number of saurians Loudon had killed was much higher. I didn't get an exact count since it had exceeded 200. What I can say, however, is Loudon had way too much life force coursing through his body now, 147,813 life force in fact. Even as highly resistant to the effects of life force as Loudon was from my manipulations when he was an egg, this amount of life force overwhelmed it. It was gradual rather than all at once, but over the course of the night his body grew larger and denser. His skin began to shed like any other saurians or snakes, causing him no end of irritation as new, stronger, more resilient skin took its place. By the time morning rolled around, his appearance was strikingly different from before. His originally ruby-red coloration had deepened to an almost black color with a vivid red shine. Size-wise he was a bit bigger but not too much larger than before. His muscles, however, had grown much denser and pronounced, much like my own muscles that you couldn't miss unless you were blind. Loudon. Life Force, 147,813. Traits: Aphrodisiacal Sweat Rare Grade 15,000 units. Omega Body Rare Grade X2 30,000 units, Armored Hide Rare Grade 15,000 units, Strong Bones Rare Grade 15,000 units, Flame Breath Uncommon Grade 2,500 units, Minor Regeneration Epic Grade 45,000 units, Enhanced Vitality Rare Grade 15,000 units, Clever Mind Uncommon Grade 2,500 units, Imprint Common Grade 1,500 units, Precise Vision Rare Grade 15,000 units, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade 2,500 units. He gained an extra stack of Omega Body, and his Armored Hide and Strong Bones traits jump a whole grade to rare. What in tarnation happened? The old man demanded when he saw Loudon in the morning. Life Force binge caused him to undergo a type of minor evolution. Quite fascinating, really. I said frankly. Just how much life force we taking here? Roland asked seriously. A bit over 200 saurians worth, give or take a dozen or so. I said with a shrug. Damn. Morty said with an impressed whistle. I'm not one to complain about those scaly nuisances gettin' butchered, but if you were after life force you've got a whole mess of rats you could kill instead, the old man said with a disappointed look. Oh no, you misunderstand. The saurians were merely collateral damage from my mass hunt of the jabbers for their body traits. On a related note, you might notice a severe lack of them for a while, but that's totally normal. I said casually. Alright, I admit you've stoked my intrigue. How many of those did you kill? The old man asked curiously. Between yesterday and the day before that, more or less 200-ish of the things. Totally worth it, by the way, as my body has never been stronger. I said with a grin as I flexed. I meant it too, as after my hunt yesterday I gained another stack of Supreme Body for a grand total of 3, and the sheer amount of relief that gave me was unreal. 2 stacks had taken me from the edge, but this third one had given me enough room to not need to worry about the concept of destruction at all anymore unless I overdid it. My full power set was open to me to use now, and I have never been stronger for it. He frowned. You sure they won't have too much trouble bouncing back from a culling like that? He asked seriously. I scoffed. Compared to the entire planet's population, what I killed was a drop in a bucket. It'll take a minute for the bald spot I left behind in their coverage to fill in, but the species is still fine. I said, dismissing the concern. All right, so long as they aren't endangered it's fine, I suppose, he said with a nod. By the way, I'm going to be heading to Athena's later to check up on things there and relax for a bit. I said, and he just nodded. You got a gift for the lass? He asked seriously. I have a trait for her that will let her live effectively forever. Does that count? I asked with a chuckle. The hell do you kill to get something like that? He asked, astonished but not dismissive. A vault monster, one nasty customer too. Some sort of extra-dimensional thing that devoured energy itself. Traits called agelessness and does exactly what it sounds like. I said with a grin. Eternal youth, a fanciful dream made reality. You've not done a fool thing like spread the fact you have this trait about, right? He asked seriously. Nope, in fact until now not even they knew about it. I said, gesturing to my friends who were staring at me with jaws practically wobbling on the floor. Why didn't you tell us? Lil asked, slightly hurt. Why would I? The trait is useless to all of you since there is only one copy of it, though I have a theory about how to recreate it myself. Rather than strain our relationship, I figured it would be better to just give it to someone else. I can promise each of you that if I figure out how to recreate it though, you'll each get a copy. I said sincerely. Kinda sucks you tried to keep it from us, but I get it. Jealousy can ruin friendships. Morty said, and I nodded. There weren't any hard feelings about it after that, as I had promised that if I could I'd make it up to them later. Giving Maya the copy I had now was also not a spontaneous decision, as we simply clicked naturally like peanut butter and jelly. Even if at some point we didn't stay together, our friendship would be unbreakable unless some really bad shit went down between us. Besides that, I understood the need to have someone around to keep me grounded, since my own lifespan was already in the hundreds of thousands of years and would only get longer as time went on. She might yearn for adventure, but she also valued peace as well, in a nice balance to myself. Honestly, we both knew almost from the get-go we would end up together in the end. The chemistry was just way too good to deny. Even if she rejected the trait, I had a backup gift already set aside in the form of a custom legendary shield made fully from scratch by yours truly. Made entirely from iridian metal and using iridian tech designs made exclusively for Sirens in mind, the shield was a work of art. Shiny sapphire blue with glowing iridian energy pathways pulsing along its hexagonal body with a rainbow-hued swirling mass of energy in its center. The shield's appearance could not be more visually stunning, and its effects were Mui Chef's kiss perfect. Name: Hand of Fate. Level: Legendary/Unique. Type: Shield. Damage type: N/A. Manufacturer: Drake. Customizations: Iridian body, Iridian wiring, Sirentological harmonizer, hexagonal shielding, fusion core recharging cell, elemental resistance up. Affix: take fate into your own hands. When used by a siren, the Hand of Fate gains a different property unique to that siren. Honestly, there was a thin veil between this and a pearlescent shield, as it was only a smidge behind my own shield and even surpassed my shield in a couple spots. One thing that dragged the quality down, I'm sure, was the fact you need to be a siren to gain the full benefits of it. Considering there's only 7 of us, that's a big downside. Underscore 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 un. https://www.patreon.com/user?u =815788544 number $:text patreon.com/patreon_loscro underscore 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 un. Alexander Drake. Life Force 981,297. Integrated traits: Clever Mind Rare Grade, Enhanced Senses Epic Grade X2, Supreme Armored Hide Epic Grade X2, Energy Projection Legendary Grade, Superior Vitality Epic Grade X3, Lesser Dragon Breath Epic Grade, Regeneration Epic Grade X2, Disease Resistance Epic Grade, Amphibious Lungs Uncommon Grade, Thermal Sensing Uncommon Grade, Water Resistance Common Grade, Active Camouflage Epic Grade, Iridian Engineering Expertise Mythical Grade, Efficient Lungs Rare Grade X2. Biometallic Bones Epic Grade, Quick Thinking Rare Grade, Minor Spatial Awareness Epic Grade, Siren, Phase Lock, Altered, Mythical Grade, Adrenal Rush Rare Grade, Mechanical Engineering Expertise Rare Grade X3, Gunsmithing Expertise, Degrading, Common Grade X3, Mechanical Savant Epic Grade, Embodiment of Destruction, Partial, Mythical Grade, Siren, Phase Trance, Mythical Grade, Supreme Body Legendary Grade X3, Martial Mastery Epic Grade, Tinkering Instinct Rare Grade. Stored Traits, Agelessness Legendary Grade. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.